The auctioneer's voice cracked with barely concealed disgust as he called my lot number, and the laughter that followed would haunt me for years. "Lot 47?" he announced, his tone dripping with disdain, gesturing toward me as if presenting spoiled meat. "Female, 18 years old, healthy despite her size, no field experience, house-trained, can cook and clean. Starting bid, $50. I stood on that sweltering August afternoon in rural Georgia, hands clasped, head bowed, trying to make myself invisible, though my body made that impossible. The wooden platform creaked under my weight, drawing snickers from the crowd. My face burned, not from the oppressive heat, but from shame. I was fat. In a world where most enslaved people were starved, worked until their bodies were nothing but skin and bones, I was an anomaly, a curiosity, a contradiction that defied the cruel expectations of slavery. The crowd murmured and pointed, some laughing openly, others shaking their heads and moving on to the next lot to those who fit the cruelly narrow definition of what a slave should look like: thin, broken by labor, stripped of vitality. Why would anyone want me? I was useless for field work, too slow, too heavy, unable to endure the relentless heat, the endless hours of toil. To feed me would be a burden, a bad investment by any calculation in the cruel economy of slavery. Then Master Thorne spoke, his voice cutting through the yard like a blade. Confident, commanding, unchallenged, he addressed the crowd. "Good God, look at the size of that one. Whoever buys her will go bankrupt just feeding her. She'll eat more than she's worth in a month, hell, more than she's worth in a week." The laughter erupted, rolling over me like a wave, drowning me in humiliation. Master Thorne, one of Georgia's wealthiest men, owned 3 plantations, 200 enslaved people, and had recently expanded into the lucrative spice trade. His words carried authority. When he mocked, others joined in, eager to curry favor with a man so powerful. If you felt this story moved you and want more untold histories of America's darkest chapters, subscribe to Vintage Chains, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from in your country. "I wouldn't take her if you paid me," he continued, warming to his theme, enjoying the attention, the laughter, the power of being able to humiliate someone with impunity. "She's probably already eaten half the livestock on her previous plantation. Look at her. She can barely stand on that platform without it creaking. The wood's going to give out any second now." More laughter, louder this time. I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on the wooden planks beneath my feet, counting the knots in the wood, trying to disappear into myself, trying to be anywhere but here. This was not new. I had heard these comments my entire life, had endured this mockery since I was a child, since the first time another slave child had called me fat girl, and the adults had laughed instead of correcting them. But it never got easier. It never stopped hurting. Each laugh was a knife. Each comment a wound that never quite healed before the next one opened it again. The auctioneer looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to move on to the next lot, to get rid of me quickly and forget this embarrassment. He had a reputation to maintain, and having unsellable merchandise on his block reflected poorly on his judgment. "Starting bid is $50. Music," he said, his voice lacking conviction, already anticipating failure. "Do I hear 50? Anyone. She's a trained house servant, excellent cook, can handle all domestic duties." Silence. No one moved. No one raised a hand. No one even looked interested. Master Thorne's mockery had done its work. I was now not just undesirable, but actively laughable. A joke that no serious buyer would consider. Damaged goods that no amount of discount could make appealing. $40, the auctioneer tried, desperation creeping into his voice now, his professional pride wounded by the lack of interest. "Surely someone needs a house servant. She can cook, she can clean. She's young and healthy. She can eat," Master Thorne interrupted, and the crowd laughed again, even harder this time. "That's what she can do, eat everything in sight. You'd need a second plantation just to grow enough food to keep her fed." Music. A man next to Thorne, one of his associates, judging by the expensive cut of his clothes, joined in. "Maybe she could be useful as a paperweight. She's certainly heavy enough." The laughter was becoming cruel now, feeding on itself, the crowd enjoying the spectacle of humiliation more than the actual auction. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, and blinked them back furiously. I would not cry, I would not give them that. Satisfaction. I'd survived 18 years of this. I could survive another day. And then a voice cut through the laughter like a knife through butter. A voice with a French accent, cultured and calm and utterly unbothered by the mockery around it. A voice that carried authority without needing to shout. $2,000. The laughter stopped instantly, cut off as if someone had closed a door on it. Music! The crowd turned as one to see who had spoken, confusion and shock written on every face. Even I looked up, shocked out of my shame by the sheer audacity of the bid, by the impossibility of what I had just heard. A man stood at the back of the crowd, tall and elegant, in a cream-colored linen suit that must have cost more than most of the slaves on the auction block that day. He was about 50 years old, with silver hair swept back from a high forehead, a neatly trimmed beard that was more gray than black, and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. He carried a walking stick with a silver handle, not because he needed it, but because it was fashionable, and he wore a gold watch chain across his vest that caught the sunlight and gleamed. This was Monsieur Dubois, though I didn't know his name yet. Music didn't know anything about him except that he was looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not disgust, music, not pity, not amusement, but something like interest, like I was a puzzle he wanted music to solve, like I was worth his attention in a way that no one had ever thought before. The auctioneer's jaw dropped, his professional composure completely shattered. "Did you say $2,000, sir?" "I did," Mujibwa said, walking forward through the crowd that parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. His voice was calm, measured, as if he had just bid $2 instead of $2,000. $2,000 for the girl. "I assume that is acceptable." "More than acceptable, sir," the auctioneer said, recovering quickly. "Music," his eyes gleaming with the unexpected windfall, already calculating his commission. "Sold to the gentleman for $2,000. "A remarkable purchase, sir. Remarkable." Master Thorne's face had gone from its normal ruddy color to a deep, angry music red. He stepped forward, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Are you mad, Dubois? $2,000 for that? You could buy 10 prime field hands for that price. You could buy 20. I could buy music." "Many things," Dubois interrupted smoothly, his tone polite but with an edge of steel underneath. "But I choose to buy her." "Is that a problem, Miss Thorne? Do you perhaps wish to outbid me? I would be happy to go higher if you feel she is worth more." The way he said Thorne's name made it clear they knew each other, and not in a friendly way. There was history there, tension, rivalry, old wounds that had never healed. The crowd sensed it too, the atmosphere shifting from amusement to anticipation, sensing that they were witnessing something more than just an unusual purchase. Thorne's face twisted with frustration. He wanted to say something cutting, something music that would put Dubois in his place, but he was trapped. If he bid higher, he would be spending a fortune on a slave he had just publicly declared worthless. If he didn't bid, he would look like he had been outmaneuvered. "It's your money to waste," Thorne said finally, his voice dripping with contempt. "Don't come crying to me when she eats you out of house and home. Don't come begging for help when you realize what a fool you've been." "I will not," Dubois said, his tone light, almost amused. "But perhaps you will come to me when you realize what you have missed. Perhaps you will come to understand that value is not always where you expect to find it. Au revoir, Mr. Thorne. Enjoy your cotton and your— what is it you're selling now? Spices? Coffee? I do hope the quality is better than your judgment." He turned to me, his expression softening slightly, and for the first time in my life I saw someone look at me without disgust or pity. Or amusement. He looked at me like I was a person, like I mattered, like I was worth $2,000 and maybe more. "Come, child," he said gently. "We have a long journey ahead of us and much to discuss. But first, let us leave this place. I find the air here somewhat unpleasant." I was led off the auction block, my legs shaking, my mind reeling from what had just happened. The auctioneer's assistant brought my ownership papers, a single sheet of paper that reduced my entire existence to a few lines of text. "Female Negro, age 18, name Esther, sold to Monsieur Jean-Baptiste Dubois for 2 zeralas. As we walked to his carriage, a beautiful thing with polished wood and velvet seats and a driver in livery, I heard Master Thorne's voice one last time, speaking to someone nearby, his words carrying clearly in the afternoon air. "Fool and his money are soon parted," he said, his voice full of satisfaction. "That Frenchman has always been too clever for his own good. This time it'll music cost him. Mark my words, he'll regret this purchase within a month. That girl will eat music him into bankruptcy." But as I climbed into that carriage, as the driver clicked his tongue and the horses began to move, as we left that auction yard and that mockery behind, I couldn't help but wonder, who was the fool really? The man who had paid a fortune for me, or the man who had let me go for the price of his pride? My name is Esther, and this is the story of how I went from being a joke on an auction block to becoming the weapon that destroyed the man who mocked me. But to understand how that happened, you need to understand what I was, what I could do, and why Monsieur Dubois saw value where everyone else saw only waste. I was born on a small plantation in South Carolina in 1835, the daughter of a house slave named Sarah, and a father I never knew. My mother never spoke of him, and I learned early not to ask. Some questions were too dangerous to voice, some truths too painful to acknowledge. From my earliest memories, I was different from the other children in the quarters. While they were thin and hungry, their bellies distended from malnutrition, their arms and legs like sticks, I was plump and round, my body somehow extracting nourishment from the same meager rations that left others starving. While they fought over scraps of food, competed for every bite, I seemed to gain weight on cornmeal and fatback, on the thin GRL and occasional vegetables that made up our diet. My mother said it was my grandmother's blood. She had been the same way, heavy and solid, with a body that held on to every calorie like a miser hoarding gold. In Africa, before she was stolen and brought to America in chains, before she was sold and resold and worked until she died, she had been valued for her size, seen as prosperous and healthy, a sign of wealth and good fortune. But in America, in slavery, being fat was a curse. It meant you were lazy, greedy, taking more than your share while others starved. It meant you were useless for the hard labor that was the only value enslaved people were supposed to have. It meant you were a joke, music, a target, something to be mocked and despised. The other children called me names: fat girl, pig, cow. The adults were sometimes kinder, but not much. They saw me as a burden, music, an extra mouth to feed when food was already scarce, a child who would never be able to work hard enough to justify her existence. But I had something else, something my mother recognized early on, something that would eventually save my life and change my destiny. I could taste things, not just taste them the way everyone tastes food, but really taste them, understand them, know them in a way that went beyond normal perception. Give me a spoonful of soup and I could tell you every ingredient, music, every spice, every herb, how long it had been cooking, whether the water came from a well or a stream. Give me a sip of wine and I could tell you where the grapes were grown, what year they were harvested, whether the barrel was oak or cherry wood, whether it had been stored in a cool cellar or a warm room. Give me a bite music of bread and I could tell you the type of wheat, the quality of the yeast, whether the water used was hard or soft, whether the oven was too hot or too cool. My mother discovered this talent when I was 5 years old. She was cooking in the big house kitchen preparing a complex sauce for the master's dinner party, and I was sitting the corner watching her work, as I often did. The kitchen was my favorite place, warm, filled with interesting smells, a place where my mother seemed less burdened, more herself. She let me taste a spoonful of the sauce, and I immediately made a face. "What's wrong?" she asked, concerned that I didn't like it. "You forgot the time," I said, "and the pepper is old. It's lost its bite. And there's too much salt, but not enough acid to balance it. You need vinegar or lemon juice." She stared at me in shock, the wooden spoon frozen in her hand. "How did you know that?" "I can taste it," I said simply, not understanding why she looked so surprised. "The time should be there, but it's not. The pepper tastes flat, like it's been sitting too long. The salt is making everything heavy, and there's nothing to cut through it." She added the thyme and fresh pepper, adjusted the salt, added a splash of vinegar. The master complimented her on the best sauce she had ever made, and she received a rare word of praise from the mistress. From that day on, she used me as her secret weapon, her taster, her quality control. Every dish she made, I tasted first, and I told her what was missing, what was too much, what needed to be adjusted. Her cooking improved dramatically, and she gained a reputation as the best cook in the county. Other plantation owners tried to buy her, but our master refused, knowing that her skills made his table the envy of his neighbors. But we kept my talent secret. D2. Talents like mine were dangerous in slavery. If the master knew what I could do, he might use me, exploit me, sell me to someone who would work me to death in some rich man's kitchen. Or worse, he might see me as a threat, as someone who knew too much, who could detect poison or identify expensive ingredients that were being stolen. So I stayed quiet, stayed in the background, and used my gift only to help my mother, only in the safety of the kitchen when no one else was watching. When I was 12, my mother died of fever. It came on suddenly. One day she was fine, the next she was burning up, delirious, calling out for her own mother who had died years before the master wouldn't pay for a doctor for a slave, and the herbs and remedies we tried weren't enough. She died 3 days later, and I was alone. Without my mother's protection, without her value as a cook to shield me, I became expendable. The master sold me to pay debts, and I was taken away from the only home I had ever known, from the other slaves who had been my family, from the kitchen where I had learned my gift. I was sold to a plantation in Georgia where I worked in the kitchen under a cook who resented me, who saw me as competition, who made my life miserable with constant criticism and occasional violence. I lasted 6 months before I was sold again, this time to a family in Savannah who needed a house servant. Over the next 6 years, I was sold 4 more times. Each owner was disappointed by my size. Each one tried to figure out what to do with me. Each one eventually decided I was more trouble than I was worth. I cooked when I could, cleaned when I had to, and endured the mockery that came with being fat in a world that valued only strength and endurance. And then I ended up on that auction block in rural Georgia, being mocked by Master Thorne, bought by M.S.C. Dubois for an impossible sum, and taken to New Orleans to begin a new life that I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. The journey to New Orleans took 5 days. We traveled by carriage to Savannah, then by steamboat down the coast and up the Mississippi River. During that time, Monsieur Dubois barely spoke to me beyond basic instructions: where to sit, when to eat, when to rest. He was polite, but distant, treating me with a courtesy that was unusual for a slave owner, but that didn't extend to actual conversation or explanation. I sat in the servant section of the steamboat, a small area below deck where enslaved people and free black servants traveled, separated from the white passengers above. I ate the food provided. Simple fare, but more than I was used to, and wondered what fate awaited me in this strange new city I had never seen. The other servants whispered about New Orleans, painting it as a place of contradictions, more free than other southern cities, music, but still built on slavery, more cultured, but more dangerous, a place where fortunes were made and lost, where people of all colors mixed in ways that would be unthinkable in Georgia or South Carolina, where the rules were different, but the fundamental reality of slavery remained unchanged. When we finally arrived, I understood what they meant. New Orleans was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a city of contradictions, French and Spanish and American all mixed together, with languages and cultures colliding on every street corner. The buildings were tall and colorful, painted in shades of yellow and pink and blue, with iron balconies decorated with elaborate scrollwork and shuttered windows that opened onto the streets. The air smelled of spices and coffee and the river, a heady mixture that was both intoxicating and overwhelming, so different from the simple smells of plantation life. Music, the streets were crowded with people of every description. White men in expensive suits, free people of color in fine clothes, enslaved people running errands, sailors from ships docked at the port, street vendors selling food and flowers, and mysterious items I couldn't identify. I heard French and Spanish and English, and languages I didn't recognize, all mixing together in a cacophony that made my head spin. Monsieur Dubois' home was in the French Quarter on a street called Rue Royale. It was a 3-story building with a courtyard entrance, the kind of house that spoke of old money and refined taste. Music, the exterior was painted a soft yellow with dark green shutters, music, and an iron balcony on the second floor where ring plants cascaded down in a riot of color. We entered through a carriageway that led to a courtyard filled with more plants, ferns and palms and flowering shrubs I couldn't name, and a fountain in the center that tinkled musically, the sound somehow cooling in the oppressive heat. The courtyard was paved with old bricks in a herringbone pattern, and the walls were covered with climbing vines that softened the hard edges of the architecture. He led me inside through rooms filled with beautiful furniture and artwork that spoke of wealth and taste, not the ostentatious display of new money, but the quiet confidence of old wealth that didn't need to prove anything. The floors were polished wood. The walls were painted in soft colors. And everywhere there were books, shelves and shelves of books in French and English, more books than I had ever seen in one place. He took me to a small but comfortable room on the second floor overlooking the courtyard. It had a real bed, not a pallet on the floor, but an actual bed, music with a mattress and sheets and a pillow. There was a small table with a chair, a wardrobe for clothes, and a window with real glass that could be opened to let in the breeze. "This is where you will sleep," he said, the first real words he had spoken to me since we left Georgia. "Rest today, eat when you're hungry. The kitchen is downstairs, and the cook will feed you. Tomorrow we begin your training." "Training for what, sir?" I asked, my voice small and uncertain, afraid of the answer but needing music to know. He smiled, the first real smile I had seen from him, and it transformed his face from stern to almost kind. training to become the most valuable asset in my business, training to use the gift you have been hiding your entire life, training to become something more than what the world thinks you are. My heart stopped. "Sir, I don't understand your sense of taste," he said, watching my face carefully. "Your ability to identify ingredients, music, to understand flavors, to know the quality and origin of foods and spices just by tasting them. Do not look so shocked, child. I have been watching you since we left Music, Georgia. I saw how you examined every meal you were given, how your face changed when you tasted something, how you knew immediately whether something was fresh or stale, good or poor quality. You have a music gift, Esther, a remarkable gift, and I intend to help you develop it, to use it, to make it into something that will change both our lives. How did you know?" I whispered, my mind reeling. I had been so careful, so secretive, never letting anyone see what I could do. How had he known? "Because I have been looking for someone like you for 5 years, he said, sitting down in the chair and gesturing for me to sit on the bed. "Let me tell you a story, Esther. Let me tell you why I paid $2,000 for you, why I traveled to that auction in Georgia, why I've been searching for someone with your particular talent. Music." He leaned back, his fingers steepled in front of him, his eyes distant as he remembered. "I am a spice merchant," he began, "one of the largest in the South, perhaps in all of America. I import coffee, tea, spices, exotic foods from all over the world, from India and China, from the Caribbean and South America, from Africa and the East Indies. My ships travel to ports you have never heard of, bringing back treasures that most people will never see. Cinnamon from Ceylon, pepper from Malabar, coffee from Java and Mocha, music tea from China, vanilla from Madagascar, cloves from Zanzibar, music nutmeg from the Spice Islands." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "My business depends on quality, on being able to guarantee to my customers that what I sell them is genuine, pure, the best available. In a world full of fraud and deception, where merchants routinely adulterate their products to increase profits, where chicory is mixed with coffee and sawdust is mixed with spices, where nothing is what it claims to be, my reputation is built on honesty and quality. My customers, wealthy planners, fine restaurants, European buyers, they trust me because I have never lied to them, never sold them inferior goods, never put profit above integrity. But maintaining that reputation is difficult. Music," he continued. "I am one man and I cannot taste everything, cannot verify every shipment. Music cannot be everywhere at once. I have employees, of course, but they lack the expertise, the refined palate, the ability to detect subtle differences in quality or to identify adulterants that are carefully hidden. I needed someone with a palate more refined than mine, someone who could taste things I cannot, someone who could be my eyes and ears and tongue in this business. I have been searching for such a person for 5 years," he said. "I have tested dozens of people, cooks, chefs, wine merchants, anyone with a reputation for a refined palate. But none of them had what I was looking for. They could taste differences, yes, but they couldn't identify origins, couldn't detect adulterants, couldn't understand flavors at the level I needed. And then I heard about you," he said, leaning forward. "I have contacts throughout the South, people who keep me informed about anything that might be useful to my business. One of them told me about a plantation in South Carolina where the cook had a reputation for extraordinary skill, where every dish was perfect, where the food was so good that other plantation owners tried to buy her. And he told me that the cook had a daughter, a fat girl who seemed to have an uncanny ability to fix any dish, to know instinctively what was needed, to taste things that others couldn't. When I heard that the cook had died and the girl had been sold, I began tracking you," he said. "I followed your sales, waited for the right moment, and when I heard you would be at that auction in Georgia, I came to see for myself. And when I saw how Thornmoe sacked you, how he dismissed you as worthless, how he couldn't see what was right in front of him, I knew I had found what I was looking for." "But why did you pay so much?" I asked, still struggling to understand. "You could have gotten me for $50, maybe less, wipe $2,000. His smile turned cold, and for the first time I saw the steel beneath the cultured exterior. Music, the ruthlessness that had made him successful in a cutthroat business. "Because I wanted Thorne to know that he had made a mistake," he said. "Because I wanted him to wonder what I saw in you that he did not. Because he is my rival, my competitor, my enemy, and I take pleasure in beating him at every opportunity. And because, my dear Esther, you are worth far more than $2,000, you are worth a fortune. You are priceless. And by the time I am done training you, by the time you have fully developed your gift, you will help me destroy Thorn and every other competitor who has ever underestimated me. If you're watching this story unfold from somewhere in the world, leave a comment telling me where you're from and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Because what happened next changed everything. Not just for me, but for Master Thorn, for Monsieur Dubois, and for everyone who had ever underestimated me because of my size. The training began the next morning. I woke to sunlight streaming through my window, to the sound of the fountain in the courtyard, to the smell of coffee and fresh bread wafting. Up from the kitchen, for a moment I thought I was dreaming. The comfortable bed, the clean room, the pleasant sounds and smells were so different from anything I had experienced in years, but it was real. All of it was real. Monsieur Dubois led me to a room on the first floor that he called his tasting laboratory. It was a large room with windows overlooking the courtyard, filled with shelves and cabinets and tables covered with jars and bottles and sacks. Each container was labeled with names I couldn't read. I had never learned to read, had never been taught, had never had the opportunity. "We will start with coffee," he said, setting out 5 small white cups on a table. "Tell me what you taste in each one. Take your time. There is no rush. I want you to really experience each sample, to understand it, to know it." I approached the first cup nervously, aware that this was a test, that my entire future depended on what I could do in this moment. I lifted the cup to my lips and took a small sip, letting the liquid sit on my tongue, letting the flavors unfold. "This is coffee," I said slowly, "but it's been mixed with something, chori root. I think maybe 30% chori, maybe a bit more. The coffee itself is low quality, harsh, music bitter, probably old beans that have been sitting too long." He nodded, making notes in a leather-bound journal, his face showing no emotion. And the next I tasted the second cup, music, and immediately the difference was obvious. Pure coffee, good qual. Itty, grown at high altitude. I think the flavor is brighter, more complex with notes of fruit, something like berries or citrus, maybe from Central America or South America. "Colombia," he said, and I saw a flicker of excitement in his eyes. "Continue." "Music," I tasted the third cup. "This is also pure coffee, but lower quality, grown at lower altitude, harsher flavor, more bitter, and it's old. The beans have been sitting for months, maybe a year. They're losing their oils, going stale. This should have been used months ago." "Remarkable," he murmured. "Music, writing faster now." And the fourth, I tasted it and immediately grimaced, almost spitting it out. "This isn't coffee at all. It's roasted grain, barley maybe, or rye. Someone's trying to pass it off as coffee, but it's not even close. It's a complete fraud." "Excellent." "Music," and the last. I tasted the final cup and paused, savoring it, analyzing the complex flavors that unfolded on my tongue. "This is pure coffee, very high quality, grown in volcanic soil. I can taste the mineral notes, something earthy and rich, carefully roasted, recently ground. The beans are fresh, probably roasted within the last week. This is expensive coffee, sir, the kind that only the wealthiest people can afford. This is extraordinary." Monsieur Dubois set down his pen and looked at me with something like awe. "Esther, you have just done in 5 minutes what it took me 20 years to learn to do, and you did it more accurately than I could have." St. Coffee was Jamaican Blue Mountain, one of the rarest and most expensive coffees in the world. I have been drinking coffee for 30 years, and I still cannot identify it as reliably as you just did. Do you understand what this means? I shook my head, overwhelmed by the praise, by the attention, by the idea that my strange talent was actually valuable. Music, that it was something to be celebrated rather than hidden. "It means," he said, "music," his voice intense, "that you are going to help me build an empire. It means that you are going to become the secret weapon that makes my business the most successful in the South, perhaps in all of America. And it means that you, my dear girl, are going to have your revenge on every person who ever mocked you for your size, whoever dismissed you as worthless, whoever made you feel like you were less than human." Over the next 3 months, my training intensified. Every day, Ms. Dubois would present me with new challenges, new tastes to identify, new skills to master. The tasting laboratory became my classroom, my sanctuary, the place where I was valued and respected and encouraged to develop my gift. I learned to distinguish between different varieties of cinnamon, true Ceylon cinnamon versus the cheaper Acacia that most merchants sold as Ceylon, Indonesian cinnamon versus Vietnamese, music, each one with its own distinct flavor profile, its own characteristics that I learned to identify instantly. I learned that true Ceylon cinnamon was Delica. Tea, sweet, complex, while Casia was harsher, more one-dimensional, cheaper to produce, but inferior in quality. I learned to identify the origin of pepper by taste alone. Telair versus Malabar from India, Sarawak from Malaysia versus Lampong from Indonesia. Each one with subtle differences in heat, flavor, and aroma that I learned to detect and describe. I learned that the best pepper came from specific regions, that altitude and soil and climate all affected the final product, that a true expert could taste the difference. I learned to detect adulterants in spices, ground nutshells mixed with cinnamon to increase volume, paprika mixed with cayenne to add color, sand or dirt mixed with pepper to music, add weight. These were common frauds in the spice trade, ways that dishonest merchants increase their profits by selling inferior products music at premium prices. But I could detect them all, could taste the difference between pure spice and adulterated music product, could identify exactly what had been added and in what proportion. I learned about coffee in exhaustive detail, the difference between Arabica and Robusta beans, the effects of altitude and soil and climate on flavor, the impact of different roasting techniques, the signs of age and deterioration. I learned that coffee from different regions, music, had distinct characteristics. African coffees were often fruity and wine-like. Central American coffees were balanced and mild. Indonesian coffees were earthy and full-bodied. I learned to identify not just the region, but sometimes the specific plantation, music, the specific harvest, the specific processing method. I learned about tea, black, green, white, oolong, and how to identify quality, origin, and freshness. I learned that tea was even more complex than coffee, with thousands of varieties and sub-varieties, each one with its own character. I learned about the great music tea growing regions of China and India, about the different processing methods that created different types of music of tea, about the subtle art of tea blending. I learned about chocolates, vanilla, saffron, and 100 other exotic ingredients that passed through Dubois' warehouse. Each one became familiar to me. Each one revealed its secrets to my tongue. Each one added to my growing expertise. But I also learned about the business itself, about the cutthroat world of spice trading, where fortunes were made and lost on the quality of a single shipment, where reputations were everything, where competitors would do anything to gain a music advantage, where fraud was common and honesty was rare. And I learned about Master Thorne. Thorne, it turned out, was not just a cotton plantation owner. He had diversified into spice trading several years ago, using his wealth and connections to establish himself as a major supplier to wealthy families throughout the South, and even in Europe. He was Dubois' primary competitor, and the rivalry between them was music, intense, personal, and bitter. Thorne is a fraud, Dubois told me one evening as we sat in his study, reviewing the day's tastings. The study was a comfortable room lined with books, with a large desk covered music in papers and ledgers, with maps on the walls showing trade routes and ports around the world. He adulterates his products, mixes cheap ingredients with expensive ones. Music lies about origins and quality. His coffee is half chory. His Ceylon cinnamon is mostly cassia. His pepper is bulked up with stems and dust. But he has connections, charm, and the advantage of being American rather than French. Many people trust him simply because he music speaks English without an accent, because he goes to the right churches, because he knows the right people. Why don't you expose him? I asked, sitting across from him, a cup of tea in my hands, a fine Chinese oolong that I had correctly identified earlier that day. Because I have no proof that would be accepted, Dubois said, frustration evident in his voice. I know his products are fraudulent. I have tasted them, analyzed them, compared them to genuine articles, but knowing and proving are different things. If I accuse him without proof that others can verify, I look like a jealous competitor making baseless accusations. If I accuse him with proof, he will claim I fabricated it, that I am trying to destroy him because I cannot compete fairly. The word of a Frenchman against the word of a prominent American plantation owner. Who do you think people will believe? What can you do then? I need something more, he said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. Something undeniable, something public, something that cannot be dismissed or explained away. I need to expose him in a way that leaves no doubt, that forces even his friends and supporters to acknowledge the truth. What kind of something? He smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile. something that reminded me that beneath his cultured exterior was a ruthless businessman who had built an empire in a competitive field. "An opportunity is coming," he said. "In 3 months there will be a grand tasting event in Charleston. It is held every year, a gathering of the wealthiest families from across the South along with buyers from Europe and the Caribbean. Merchants display their finest products and the attendees judge quality, place music orders, establish contracts. It is the most important event in the spice trade, the place where reputations are made or destroyed, where fortunes change hands. Thorne will be there," he continued. "He attends every year, displays his products, charms the customers, takes orders worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I will be there as well as I am every year. But this year will be different. This year I will have you, me, but I'm you, are my secret weapon." He said, "You are the one person who can definitively prove that Thorne's products are inferior, that he is a fraud, that he has been deceiving his customers for years, music, and you will do it in front of everyone who matters in a way that cannot be denied or dismissed, in a way that will destroy his reputation and his business forever." "How?" I asked, both excited and terrified by the prospect. "Leave that to me," he said, his smile widening. "For now, continue your training, continue developing your skills. When the time comes, you will know what to do, and when it is over, Thorne will regret the day he mocked you on that auction block. He will regret every word, every laugh, every moment of cruelty, and he will apologize to you publicly in front of everyone who heard him mock you. I promise you that." The months passed quickly, each day bringing new lessons, new challenges, new discoveries. My skills improved dramatically, my palate becoming more refined, my ability to detect even the smallest impurities or variations becoming almost supernatural. I could taste things that Dubois couldn't, could identify origins and qualities that even experienced merchants missed, could detect fraud that had fooled experts for years. Dubois treated me well during this time. I was fed good food, given comfortable quarters, spoken to with respect rather than contempt. It was strange being valued for the first time in my life, being seen as an asset rather than a burden, being encouraged to develop my talents rather than hide them, but I was still a slave. I still had no freedom, no control over my own life, no guarantee that his situation would last. Dubois was kind, but he owned me. Music, and that fundamental reality colored everything. I was valuable to him, yes, but only as long as I was useful. If I failed, if I disappointed him, if I proved to be less valuable than he thought, what would happen to me then? I tried not to think about it. I focused on my training, on developing my skills, on preparing for the moment when I would face Thorne again and prove my worth to the world. The event in Charleston was scheduled for November 15th, 1853. We traveled there a week early, music, taking a steamboat up the coast, staying in a fine hotel where I was housed in the servants' quarters. Music, but treated better than I had ever been treated before. Dubois spent the week preparing, arranging his display, meeting with potential clients, and plotting his strategy against Thorne. On the morning of the event, he called me to his room and presented me with a dress. A beautiful thing in deep blue silk with white lace trim, finer than anything I had ever worn or even touched. It was clearly expensive, clearly made for someone of status, not for a slave. "You will wear this today," he said, watching my reaction. "You will stand beside me as my assistant, my expert, my partner, not as a slave, but as a professional. Do you understand?" I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, my hands trembling as I touched the silk. "Thorne will be there," he continued, his voice serious. "He will see you, and he will remember mocking you at that auction. He will wonder why I brought you, what purpose you serve, what I see in you that he did not, and then when the moment comes, you will show him. You will show everyone. Are you ready?" "Yes, sir," I said, and I meant it. I was ready. I had been ready my entire life for this moment, for the chance to prove that I was more than what people saw, more than my size, more than their mockery and contempt. The event was held in a grand ballroom in one of Charleston's finest hotels, a massive room with crystal chandeliers and polished floors and tall windows that let in the November sunlight. Long tables lined the walls, each one displaying the products of different merchants: coffee, tea, spices, chocolates, exotic fruits, rare ingredients from around the world. The room was filled with wealthy planters and their wives, European buyers in expensive suits, society ladies in elaborate gowns, all of them circulating, tasting, evaluating, gossiping, making deals worth fortunes. Dubois' table was near the center of the room, positioned prominently, displaying his finest products, pure Colombian coffee, true Ceylon cinnamon, Telly cherry pepper, Madagascar vanilla, and other exotic spices. All of them labeled clearly, honestly, with no exaggeration or deception. Everything was arranged beautifully, professionally, designed to showcase quality and integrity. Thorne's table was directly across from ours, and it was impressive, or at least it appeared to be. His display was larger, more elaborate, with more products and more variety. His coffee was labeled as pure Jamaica Blue Mountain, his cinnamon as finest Ceylon, his pepper as premium Malabar, his vanilla as Tahitian. The prices were slightly lower than Dubois, making his products seem like better value, like a smart purchase for the discerning buyer. When Thorne saw me standing beside Dubois dressed in fine silk, his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, recognition, and then amusement. He walked over, a smile on his face, confident and mocking, surrounded by associates who laughed at his jokes and agreed with everything he said. Dubois, he called out, "Music," his voice carrying across the room, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "I see you brought your investment. Tell me, has she eaten you out of house and home yet? Or have you discovered some use for her that justifies that ridiculous price you, Music, paid?" Some people laughed, others looked uncomfortable, sensing that something was happening but not sure what. Dubois smiled calmly, his expression pleasant, showing no sign of anger or offense. "Mademoiselle Esther is my chief taster and quality expert," he said, his voice clear, music and professional. "She has a palate more refined than anyone in this room, including myself. I trust her judgment absolutely, and my customers have come to rely on her expertise to guarantee the quality of my products." "Your chief taster," Thorne laughed, and his associates L.A. oughed with him. "Well, that explains the size of her, doesn't it? Must be a hard job, tasting all day long. I imagine she volunteers for extra shifts." More laughter, but less than before. Some people were starting to sense that this was more than just casual mockery, that there was tension here, history, something deeper than a simple joke. The event proceeded through the morning and into the afternoon. Buyers circulated, tasted products, made notes, and placed preliminary orders. Both Dubois and Thorne were doing well. Music, their tables crowded with interested customers, their products receiving praise and generating orders. And then came the moment Dubois had been waiting for, the moment he had planned for, the moment that would change everything, the blind tasting competition. This was the highlight of the event. Music, the moment when reputations were made or destroyed, when the best merchants proved their worth and the frauds were exposed. 5 judges, Music, all respected experts in the field, would taste products from each merchant Music, without knowing whose products they were tasting. They would rate them on quality, purity, authenticity, and value. The merchant with the highest overall score would win exclusive contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the prestige that came with being recognized as the best. But this year there was an unexpected development. One of the judges, a respected tea merchant from Boston, had fallen ill that morning and couldn't participate. Music, the organizers, needed a replacement, someone with expertise and credibility. Music, someone who could evaluate products fairly and accurately. Dubois stepped forward, his timing perfect, his voice confident. "I would like to propose Mademoiselle Esther as the 5th judge," he said. The room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to look at us. Thorne's face turned red, his expression shifting from amusement to anger. "That's absurd," he said. Music, his voice loud, aggressive. "She's a slave. She has no credentials, no reputation, no standing in this industry. This is a joke, Dubois. You're making a mockery of this entire event." "Is it a joke?" Dubois said calmly, his voice reasonable, his expression innocent. "Then let us test her. Let us see if she can identify products accurately, if she truly has the expertise I claim. Music, if she fails, I will withdraw from the competition entirely and concede victory to you, Mr. Thorne. I will publicly acknowledge that you are the superior merchant, that your products are better than mine. But if she succeeds, if she proves her expertise beyond any doubt, then she takes the 5th judge's seat and evaluates all products, Music, fairly, including yours and mine. Do you accept this challenge?" Thorne hesitated. He was trapped, and he knew it. If he refused, he would look afraid, would look like he was trying to avoid scrutiny. If he accepted and I failed, he would win everything. The competitio, the contracts, the satisfaction of proving Dubois wrong. But if he accepted and I succeeded, he would have to compete against my judgment, would have to submit his fraudulent products to someone who could detect every lie, every deception, every adulterant. The crowd waited, watching, sensing that this was a pivotal moment, that something important was happening. "Fine," Thorne said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Let's see what your fat taster can do. Let's see if she's worth that ridiculous price you paid. But when she fails, and she will fail, you will honor your promise. You will withdraw and concede victory music to me." "Agreed," Dubois said and turned to me. "Esther, are you ready?" I nodded, my heart pounding, my mouth dry, knowing that everything depended on this moment, music, that my entire future, Dubois' reputation, and Thorne's fate all hung in the balance. The organizer set up a test. 10 samples were prepared: coffee, spices, tea, each one unlabeled, each one a mystery. Music, I would taste them and identify them completely. Origin, quality, any adulterants, any deceptions. If I got even one wrong, I would fail and Dubois would lose everything. I stepped forward, approaching the table where the samples were arranged. The room was silent, everyone watching, waiting to see if I would fail, if Dubois' faith in me was misplaced, if Thorne's mockery was justified. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and began. The first sample was coffee. I lifted the cup, inhaled the aroma, took a small sip, let it sit on my tongue, analyzed the flavors. "Korean coffee," I said clearly, my voice steady despite my nervousness. "High altitude, probably from the Gila region, recently roasted within the last week. Pure, no adulterants, Arabica beans, high quality." The organizer checked his notes, his face showing surprise. "Correct. Completely correct." A murmur ran through the crowd. I continued to the second sample. "Ceylon cinnamon," I said after tasting. "True Ceylon, not Casia. From Sri Lanka, probably from the southern coastal region. Fresh, high quality, no adulterants." "Correct," the organizer said, and the murmurs grew louder. I tasted the third sample and paused, analyzing what I was tasting, making sure I was right. "Black pepper," I said, "but not pure. This is Malabar pepper mixed with approximately 20% ground pepper stems and dust, an adulterant added to increase volume and profit. The pepper itself is good quality music, but it has been deliberately contaminated to cheat the buyer." The room erupted in whispers. The organizer checked his notes, his face showing shock. "Correct. The sample was deliberately adulterated for this test to see if you could detect it. You're the first person to identify it correctly." I continued through all 10 samples, my confidence growing with each one. I identified Colombian and Jamaican coffee, distinguished between Ceylon and Casia cinnamon, detected adulterants in pepper and nutmeg, identified the origin of tea from China and India, analyzed vanilla from Madagascar and Tahiti. When I finished, the room was completely silent, everyone staring at me in amazement. The head organizer, an elderly man with white hair and a stern expression, stood and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying authority, "I have been in the spice trade for 40 years. I have judged this competition for 20 years. I have never seen anything like what we have just witnessed. Mademoiselle Esther has identified every sample perfectly, including adulterants that even our expert judges missed. She has demonstrated expertise that surpasses anyone music in this room. She is more than qualified to serve as a judge in this competition." The crowd erupted in applause. Thorne's face was pale, his expression showing shock and fear. He knew what was coming, knew that he was about to be exposed, knew that his frauds were about to be revealed in front of everyone who mattered. "Does anyone object to Mademoiselle Esther serving as the 5th judge?" the organizer asked. Silence. No one objected. Music, even Thorne said nothing, trapped by his own agreement, unable to back out now without looking like a coward. "Then let the competition begin," the organizer said. The blind tasting music proceeded. Samples from each merchant were presented to the judges, who tasted and rated them on quality, purity, authenticity, and value. I tasted music carefully, analyzing each sample, making notes, being as fair and objective as I could be. When I tasted Dubois' products, I recognized them immediately: the pure Colombian coffee, the true Ceylon cinnamon, the Teletary pepper, all of them exactly what they claimed to be, music, all of them high quality, all of them worth the premium prices he charged. And when I tasted Thor's products, I knew immediately that they were fraudulent. Music, his coffee was not pure Jamaica Blue Mountain. It was coffee mixed with Kori root, approximately 40% chori, harsh and bitter, nothing like the smooth, complex flavor of genuine Jamaican coffee. I stood, my voice clear and steady, and announced my findings. "This coffee is not pure," I said, holding up the cup so everyone could see. "This is coffee mixed with Kori root, approximately 40% chori. It is being sold as pure Jamaica Blue Mountain. But it is a fraud. It is a deliberate deception designed to cheat buyers who are paying premium prices for what they believe is a premium product. Thorne stood, his face red with anger. That's a lie. My coffee is pure. She's lying to help Dubois. Then let us test it, I said calmly, meeting his eyes without fear. Bring a sample of genuine Jamaica Blue Mountain from another source. Let me taste them side by side. Let everyone in this room see the difference. Let the truth be revealed. Music they did. A sample of genuine Jamaica Blue Mountain was brought from another merchant's table. I tasted both side by side, and the difference was obvious, undeniable, impossible to miss. The genuine coffee was smooth, complex, with notes of chocolate and nuts, and a subtle sweetness. Thorne's coffee was harsh, bitter, with the distinctive medicinal taste of chori, nothing like the real thing. I passed both cups to the other judges, who tasted and confirmed my assessment. The evidence was undeniable. I continued through Thorne's other products, exposing each fraud in turn. His finest Ceylon cinnamon was mostly cassia, the cheaper variety that most merchants sold as Ceylon harsh and one-dimensional, compared to true Ceylon's delicate complexity. His premium Malabar pepper was bulked up with ground stems and dust, increasing the volume by at least 30%, cheating buyers who thought they were getting pure pepper. His Tahitian vanilla was diluted with synthetic vanilla, the artificial flavoring that was cheaper than real vanilla but lacked the complexity and depth of the genuine article. Every product was a fraud. Every label was a lie. Every price was a theft. The room erupted in chaos. Buyers who had placed orders with Thorne demanded refunds, their voices angry and betrayed. Society ladies who had praised his products looked shocked and embarrassed, realizing they had been fooled. European buyers shook their heads and walked away, their trust destroyed, their business lost forever. Thorne stood in the center of the chaos, his reputation destroyed, his business ruined, his face a mask of shock and rage and disbelief. He had been exposed, humiliated, music destroyed in front of everyone who mattered, and there was nothing he could do to fix it, no way to undo what had been revealed. The head organizer approached him, his expression stern and disappointed. "Muser Thorne," he said, his voice cold. "These are serious allegations. The evidence suggests that you have committed fraud on a massive scale, that you have been deceiving your customers for years. This is not just a business matter, this is a criminal matter. You must address this immediately, Music, or I will be forced to report this to the authorities." Thorne looked around the room, saw the faces of his former customers, his former friends, his former supporters, all of them looking at him with disgust and disappointment and anger. He saw Music Dubois standing calmly beside me, a slight smile on his face, the smile of a man who had just won a long and bitter war. And he saw me, the fat slave girl he had mocked on an auction block 3 months ago, the girl who had just destroyed him with nothing but her tongue and her truth. One of the European buyers, a stern-looking man with a German accent and expensive clothes, stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Herr Thorne," he said, his voice shaking with rage, "you have sold me adulterated products for 2 years. You have cost me money and reputation. My customers trusted me, and I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. You will apologize to this young woman who exposed your fraud, or I will ensure that every merchant in Europe knows what you have done. I will destroy what little reputation you have left. I will make sure you never do business again." Other voices joined in, a chorus of demands for accountability, for apology, for justice. Thorne was surrounded, trapped by the consequences of his own deception and his own arrogance. Music with no escape, no way out. He turned to me, his face twisted with humiliation and rage and something that might have been fear. For a long moment he just stared. And I stared back, no longer afraid, no longer ashamed, no longer the joke he had made me on that auction block. "I apologize," he said finally, the words forced out through clenched teeth, each syllable clearly painful. "I was wrong to mock you. I was wrong about your value. I was wrong about everything. I apologize. It wasn't sincere. It wasn't heartfelt. It was forced, extracted under pressure, given only to avoid even worse consequences. But it was public. It was witnessed by everyone who mattered. It was recorded in the memories of hundreds of people who would tell the story for years to come. And it was enough." Dubois stepped forward, his moment of triumph complete, his victory absolute. "Mademoiselle Esther," he said formally, pulling papers from his pocket, "you have proven your worth beyond any doubt. You have exposed fraud, protected innocent buyers, and upheld the integrity of this industry. In recognition of your service and in acknowledgement of your extraordinary talent, I am granting you your freedom effective immediately." He handed me the papers, manumission papers already prepared, already signed, making me legally free. "You are no longer a slave," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "You are a free woman, and if you choose, you are my business partner with a full share in the profits of our enterprise. You have earned it." Music, you have more than earned it. I took the papers with shaking hands, unable to speak. Music, unable to process what was happening. Free. I was free. After 18 years of slavery, of mockery, of being seen as worthless, I was free, and I was valued. Not despite my size, not despite my appearance, but because of my talent, my skill, my gift that no one else had seen, that everyone had dismissed, that had finally proven to be worth more than anyone could have imagined. Thorne left Charleston that night, his business in ruins. Music, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. Within a year, he had sold his plantations and moved west, trying to start over where no one knew his name, where his shame wouldn't follow him, but it did follow him. The story spread, told and retold, becoming legend in the spice trade, a cautionary tale about the dangers of fraud and the importance of integrity. Dubois and I built an empire together. With my palate and his business acumen, we became the most trusted spice merchants in the South and eventually in all of America. We never lied, never cheated, never adulterated our products. We didn't have to. We had something better than deception. We had quality, and we had me to guarantee it. I lived to see the Civil War, to see slavery abolished, to see the world change in ways I never imagined possible. I lived to be 73 years old, dying in 1908 as a wealthy woman, a respected businesswoman, a pioneer in an industry that had once seen me as nothing but a joke. But I never forgot that auction block in Georgia. I never forgot Thorne's laughter, the crowd's mockery, the shame of being seen as worthless, and I never forgot the moment when I proved them all wrong. When I showed that the thing they mocked, my size, my difference, my body that didn't fit their expectations, was connected to the gift that made me invaluable. This is my story, the story of how I went from being a joke to being a weapon, from being worthless to being priceless, from being a slave to being free. And it all started because one man saw value where everyone else saw only waste, and because another man's arrogance blinded him to the truth that would destroy him. Esther lived in New Orleans until her death in 1908 at the age of 73. She and Monsieur Dubois built one of the most successful spice trading companies in America. Known throughout the industry for their absolute integrity and uncompromising quality. After Dubois' death in 1875, Esther continued to run the business with the same principles, eventually passing it on to her adopted daughter Marie, whom she had freed from slavery in 1862. She never married but was known throughout New Orleans for her generosity, particularly to formerly enslaved people trying to build new lives after the Civil War. She funded schools, provided business loans, music, and mentored dozens of young people in the spice trade. She was buried in St. Louis, with Cemetery No. 2 in New Orleans holds her final resting place. Her grave is marked by an elaborate tombstone that reads, Esther Dubois, 1835 to 1908. She lived her life fully and found the world in all its complexity surprisingly good. She proved that true value is not measured by appearances but by gifts unseen, talents hidden beneath the surface. Master Thorne, by contrast, died in obscurity in California in 1867. His name forgotten, his fortune gone, his reputation destroyed. Yet the story of the girl he mocked, the girl he underestimated, lived on. In the circles of spice trading and beyond, Esther's tale became legend, passed down for generations. A cautionary story: those who judge by appearances often miss the greatest gifts, and those who mock others reveal more about their own limitations than about the person they deride. Esther's journey from ridicule to triumph reminds us that intelligence, skill, and determination can overcome even the harshest oppression. Talent and courage can be found in the most unexpected places, and the world often owes its greatest achievements to those we least expect. If stories like Esther's inspire you, and you want to uncover more tales of people who defied expectations and proved their worth against all odds, subscribe to Vintage Chains, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Tell us your country and city, and let us know what story of hidden talent inspires you most.